Let me ask you a question that might sting a little, but answer honestly. How many times have you thought that the solution to your financial life was simply to work more, pick up overtime, take on a side hustle, sleep less, accept more responsibility, push yourself beyond your limits? And let me ask you an even more uncomfortable question. Even working more than a lot of people, do you feel like you're actually becoming more financially secure or just more exhausted? Now pause and think with me in silence for a few seconds. Imagine your bank account is at zero, completely zero. You have nothing saved. It feels bad, of course. It's scary. It's unsettling. But interestingly, when your account is at zero, you already know you're at the bottom. There's nothing left to lose. Now imagine you managed to save $3,000, $5,000, $10,000. For the first time in your life, you look at your balance and feel a certain pride. But instead of peace, a new anxiety begins. What if I need to use it? What if something goes wrong? What if this money disappears? What if I lose my job now? I need to fix what's urgent. But when you start to accumulate a little, another part of your brain activates and begins protecting it as if it were the last thing left in the world. You start to fear losing it. And the fear of losing can be stronger than the desire to gain. Now combine that with the idea planted in your head since childhood. Whoever works more earns more. Whoever tries harder grows more. Whoever sacrifices more becomes wealthy. It sounds logical. It sounds fair. It even sounds morally right. But there's a huge problem hidden therein. That's exactly what no one explains to you. Working more increases your active income, but it doesn't necessarily increase your financial intelligence, your structure, your organization, your ability to make decisions without panic. And when income rises without structure, your lifestyle rises with it. And when your lifestyle rises, your expenses rise too. And when expenses rise, the feeling remains the same. I work so much and never get ahead. Have you ever felt that the feeling of always running, always busy, always tired, and still afraid of the future? It's like your financial life is a treadmill. You run and run and run and run and stay in the same place. And let me tell you something that may sound harsh. Working more the way most people do does not bring you closer to wealth. Often, it pushes you further away because while you're selling more hours of your life, you're giving up the time needed to think strategically, to organize, to structure, to create systems. You trade planning for exhaustion, clarity for urgency, long-term vision for monthly survival. And this isn't your fault. This is what you were taught. They told you success equals extreme effort, that exhaustion is a badge of honor, that sleeping less means ambition, that saying yes to everything means humility. But no one showed you the emotional cost of that. When you constantly increase your workload, your mind stays in a permanent state of alert. Small problems become major crises. A broken refrigerator becomes panic. An unexpected bill becomes despair. A delayed paycheck becomes a tragedy. And here's a central point almost no one understands. Wealth begins much more with reducing stress than with increasing income. There is a threshold when your brain stops operating out of fear and starts operating out of reason. While you're pressured, threatened, exhausted, your mind works as if it's running from danger. You don't make strategic decisions. You react. You put out fires. Now think with me. How is someone supposed to build real wealth if they're always reacting? Working more might increase your money in the short term, but if you remain financially unstable, emotionally, you remain vulnerable. And constant vulnerability prevents solid construction. Have you noticed how people who earn more are not always the ones who become wealthy? Some people earn a lot and live on the edge, while others earn less but grow consistently. The difference isn't just in the number of hours worked, it's in how the money is organized and how the brain deals with it. And here comes an uncomfortable truth. While you believe you need to work more to fix your financial life, you might be ignoring the real problem, which is structural and psychological. If working more were the ultimate answer, the richest people in the world would be the ones working the most hours a day. But many people who work 12, 14, 16 hours a day are financially pressured, and many who have organized systems work less than they used to. Do you see the difference? system versus raw effort. Now, let me go a little deeper. When you increase your working hours, you increase your mental fatigue. And when fatigue rises, your ability to say no decreases. You start spending more impulsively because you deserve it, because you're tired, because you need a reward, because you need to feel like all that effort was worth it. You work more to earn a little more, feel exhausted, spend to compensate, and end up back at the same point. It's a silent cycle. And it's cruel because it feels like you're doing everything right. Maybe you're thinking right now, so does that mean hard work doesn't matter? That's not it. Work is necessary. But working more without strategy, without organization, without structure is like pouring more water into a bucket with a hole. The problem isn't the amount of water. It's the hole. And almost always, the hole is in three places. No one taught you to look. Lack of a structured emergency fund, lack of an automatic system, and lack of real clarity about your own numbers. You can increase your income by $2,000 tomorrow. If you don't have a system, that money evaporates. It gets absorbed by your lifestyle, by unexpected expenses, by accumulated desires, by the emotional debts you carry. Now let's talk about something that hurts, but needs to be said. Many people want to get rich because they're tired of feeling small financially, tired of not being able to choose, tired of depending on others, tired of feeling embarrassed, tired of watching others move ahead. But wealth is not born from exhaustion. Wealth is born from cold, repetitive, and silent organization. And organization requires something people who overwork almost never have: mental space. Have you noticed that the more tired you are, the harder it becomes to organize your finances? It seems simple to sit down and look at numbers. But when you're drained, you avoid it. You postpone it, you escape it, because facing reality requires emotional energy. So you work more to avoid facing the disorganization, but it remains there. Now let me show you practical proof that working more is not the main path to getting rich. Imagine two people earning the same salary. The first decides to work overtime every month. The second keeps normal hours but creates an automatic system. Sets aside a fixed amount as soon as the paycheck hits, builds a non-negotiable reserve, organizes fixed expenses, cuts small invisible costs, and stays consistent. At first, the first person seems to be advancing faster, more money in the account, more sacrifice, more effort. But after a year, the difference appears. The second person has emotional stability. They can say no to impulsive purchases because they know exactly where their money goes. They have a reserve that prevents small problems from turning into panic. They have clarity. The first person is exhausted. They swing between good months and tight months. They can't maintain consistency because their income depends on physical effort. If they get sick, income drops. If motivation fades, income drops. If something happens, everything falls apart. Do you see the fragility? Wealth requires predictability, and predictability doesn't align with constant exhaustion. Let's go even deeper. There's something called loss aversion. When you gain a little, you start fearing loss more than you desire growth. That makes you either overly conservative or overly risky, depending on your emotional profile. And when you're financially pressured, your ability to evaluate risk decreases. That's why many people who overwork end up making bad financial decisions, jumping into businesses impulsively, accepting poorly analyzed offers, taking on debt to try to speed up gains. It's not lack of intelligence. It's excess pressure. When your mind is in survival mode, it wants fast relief. And wealth is not fast relief. It's slow construction. And here's the turning point. Almost no one notices. The real financial shift doesn't happen when you double your workload. It happens when you reach a level of savings that changes your mental state. There's a specific point where your brain understands you're no longer in immediate danger. When that happens, you start making more rational decisions. You negotiate better. You choose better. You reject bad opportunities. You think long term. Before that, you just react. So maybe the question isn't how do I work more, but how do I create enough structure to get out of survival mode? Because while you're in that mode, any income increase will be consumed by urgency. And I know this might feel uncomfortable right now, because maybe you're exactly in that phase, working beyond your limit, tired, feeling like you have to keep going because stopping feels dangerous. But answer me honestly, work more until when? Until your body gives out. until your mind shuts down, until you lose your health, until you lose your relationships. If extreme effort guaranteed wealth, the world would look very different. What builds wealth isn't intensity, it's direction. And direction requires clarity, systems, reserves, emotional organization. So let's continue, because this is where most people get lost without realizing it. Have you noticed how working more almost always comes with a constant sense of urgency? It feels like you can never fully relax, never slow down, never say, now it's under control. There's always a future bill, a future goal, a future insecurity pushing you forward as if you're always behind in your own life. And that feeling of being behind is extremely dangerous, because when you feel financially behind, you start comparing. You look at the coworker who bought a new car, the cousin who traveled, the person online who seems to be constantly growing, and that creates silent pressure inside you, a pressure that says you need to speed up. But accelerating when you're already tired doesn't increase clarity, it increases impulsiveness. This is where invisible self-sabotage begins. It's not conscious. You don't wake up thinking, today I'm going to harm my financial life. But it happens in daily You work more and think, I deserve it. I deserve to order food today because I'm exhausted. I deserve to buy something because I work so hard. I deserve to upgrade this phone because I hustle so much. It doesn't seem wrong. It seems fair. And that's exactly why it's so hard to see the pattern. The reward becomes emotional anesthesia, but every time you use money to relieve exhaustion, you weaken your structure. And every time you weaken your structure, you need to work more to compensate. It's a closed loop. Now, pay attention to this important detail. When you depend on working more to sustain your life, you create fragile income because it depends exclusively on your physical and mental energy. If you get sick, it drops. If you lose motivation, it drops. If the market shifts, it drops. If a personal problem arises, it drops. That's not wealth. That's dependence on your own effort. And here's the clearest proof that working more doesn't make you rich. True wealth requires stability even when you slow down. If your financial life collapses the moment you ease up, you haven't built wealth. You've built continuous effort. Now, let me touch on something even deeper. There's an invisible cost to overworking that almost no one calculates, the cost of not thinking. When you're always busy, always solving tasks, always running, you don't have space to observe patterns. You don't see where your money is really going. You don't notice which expenses are emotional. You don't recognize which decisions you're repeating month after month. Without awareness, there's no correction. And without correction, there's no growth. You can multiply your income 5 times. If you keep repeating the same emotional patterns, the final result will look very similar. Maybe with bigger numbers, but with the same anxiety. Have you ever met someone who received a significant raise and a few months later was complaining that money still wasn't enough? That doesn't happen by bad luck. It happens because income was never the only problem. Structure was, and structure isn't a complicated spreadsheet. Structure is repeated simplicity. It's knowing exactly how much comes in, exactly how much goes out. Deciding before the month begins where the money will go. Setting money aside before spending. Not trying to save what's left. Creating a reserve that isn't touched impulsively. But here's the most important point of all. The reserve isn't just for emergencies. It's to calm your brain. When you have a consistent reserve, your internal alarm system starts to quiet down. You don't panic over small surprises. You don't accept any offer out of fear. You don't make desperate decisions. And that completely changes your trajectory. Because most bad financial decisions are born from desperation, not from lack of intelligence. Now, let me show you something that might change how you see effort. There are 2 types of effort: physical effort and structural effort. Physical effort is working more hours, doing more tasks, increasing your load. Structural effort is organizing your life so that money operates within clear rules even when you're tired. The first depends on energy. The second depends on decision. The first drains you. The second strengthens you. Most people choose the first because it seems faster, more immediate, more heroic. But the second is what builds real stability. And stability is the soil of wealth. Now let me say something that might be hard to admit. Many people use overworking as emotional escape. Working too much prevents you from facing financial frustration head on. As long as you're busy, you don't have to think that maybe the problem lies in how you organize your money. It's more comfortable to believe the solution is working more than to admit you may never have learned how to structure things, and that's not your fault. No one teaches this in school. Most families don't teach it either. What they teach is study, work, try hard, but they rarely teach organize, automate, build reserves, reduce your stress. And here's what truly separates those who build wealth from those who only chase it: the ability to slow down in order to organize. It sounds contradictory, I know, but slowing down strategically is what allows you to grow solidly. It doesn't mean stop working. It means stop relying exclusively on working more as the solution. It means taking time to build a simple financial architecture. An architecture where as soon as your paycheck hits, a portion automatically goes to your reserve. Fixed bills are mapped and predictable. There's a clear cap for variable spending. Big decisions are based on real numbers, not momentary emotions. That pulls you out of survival mode. And when you leave survival mode, you start seeing opportunities you couldn't see before. You negotiate your salary better. You evaluate whether switching fields makes sense. You think about strategic extra income, not desperate extra income. Do you see the difference? Strategic extra income is born from calm. Desperate extra income is born from fear, and fear makes you accept anything. Now, I want you to imagine a concrete situation. Two people receive the same news. The company might lay off employees in the coming months. The first person works 14 hours a day, lives on the financial edge, has no consistent reserve. Upon hearing the news, they panic. They accept any side offer, overload themselves, make rush decisions. The second person has a few months of organized expenses saved. Not a millionaire, but structured. Upon hearing the same news, they feel concern, of course, but not desperation. They have time to evaluate. They have room to choose. Who is more likely to make an intelligent decision? This is where you begin to understand that wealth is not just accumulating high numbers. It's creating emotional margin. And emotional margin comes from structure, not exhaustion. If working more were enough, doubling your hours would double your peace of mind. But, that's not how it works. Because maybe you've already doubled your hours at some point. Peace didn't double with it. So now we enter the part that truly changes the game, and I need you to listen calmly. Because this might be the first time someone explains money to you without romanticizing extreme effort and without selling a magic formula. The first point you need to accept is uncomfortable. You don't necessarily need to earn much more to start leaving survival mode. You need to create margin, and margin doesn't begin with a miracle. It begins with structural decision. As long as you believe you'll only organize your life when you earn more, you hand your future to something that hasn't happened yet. You tie your peace to a raise, a promotion, a new job, an extra income stream that might not even exist, and that keeps you emotionally hostage. Now let's flip the logic. Instead of asking, how do I earn more? You start asking, how do I better organize what's already coming in today? I know that might create resistance, because what's coming in today may feel insufficient. But let me show you something important. Disorganization amplifies scarcity. Organization reduces perceived scarcity. When you don't know exactly where your money goes, everything feels like it's not enough. When you clearly see the flow, even if it's tight, you gain control. And control reduces anxiety. This is where practical proof begins that working more is not the first step to getting rich. The first step is absolute clarity. You need to know, without guessing, how much net income comes in each month, not an emotional average. The real number. Then you need to list all fixed expenses, all of them, without hiding anything from yourself. Rent, electricity, water, internet, transportation, installments, subscriptions. So when you put it on paper, something powerful happens. Money stops being an invisible monster and becomes something concrete. And when it's concrete, it can be organized. The second step is decision before emotion. Most people do it like this. Paycheck comes in, life happens. And at the end of the month, they try to see if there's anything left to save. That almost never works. Because the month is emotional, surprises happen, fatigue shows up, invitations appear, sales flash on the screen. If you rely on willpower at the end of the month, you've already lost. Structure must happen at the beginning. As soon as the money comes in, a portion must automatically leave for your reserve, even if it's small. Even if it feels insignificant, the amount isn't the main point at first. The habit is because something silent and extremely powerful happens here. You start teaching your brain that saving money isn't optional. It's standard. And standards reduce mental strain. The third step is creating a reserve with psychological function, not just financial. Many people think a reserve is only for emergencies, but its main function is to change your mental state. When you accumulate the equivalent of 1 month of basic expenses, something shifts inside you. It's not euphoria. It's a slight reduction in tension. When you reach 2 months, your breathing changes. When you reach 3, you begin to notice that small problems no longer knock you down. That's the threshold where your brain starts leaving constant alert mode. And when that happens, you start making less impulsive decisions. Now pay attention because this is crucial. Working more doesn't give you that effect if you don't retain the money. You can double your income. If you don't build a reserve, your brain stays on alert. That's why there are people who earn a lot and are still anxious. High income without reserve is just high lifestyle with high fear. And here's another point almost no one talks about. The more you work without structure, the more you associate money with suffering. You begin to think money only comes through exhaustion. That growth means losing quality of life. That getting rich means living under pressure. That association creates internal resistance. Part of you wants to earn more. Another part wants to avoid the suffering you associate with the process, and that generates self-sabotage. You accept earning more, but raise expenses alongside it. You increase salary, but inflate your lifestyle. You grow, but don't accumulate. Because deep down, you never built a system that separates growth from burnout. And now let me show you where most people who overwork make a silent mistake. They confuse movement with progress. Being busy is not the same as moving forward. Working 12 hours a day doesn't mean you're building assets. Sometimes it just means you're maintaining a lifestyle that depends on those 12 hours, and that's very different. Wealth begins when your life stops depending entirely on your daily effort. And it starts small. It starts when you create a simple rule. A portion of what I earn is never touched for consumption. That portion becomes protection. Protection becomes calm. Calm becomes clarity. Clarity becomes better decisions. Better decisions become growth. And now let's talk about something practical and direct. If today you depend on working beyond your schedule just to close the month, your initial focus isn't getting rich. It's stabilizing. And stabilizing means reducing invisible expenses that drain financial energy, canceling small subscriptions you barely use, reevaluating consumption patterns that emerge as emotional rewards, creating a clear ceiling for variable spending. It may seem too simple, and that's exactly why it works. Complicated exhausts, simple sustains, and here's a truth that might bother you. Often, you don't need to work more. You need to spend less emotional energy trying to maintain an image or standard that isn't sustainable. Maybe you're trying to prove something to someone. Maybe you're compensating for frustrations. Maybe you're trying to feel on the same level as others. But as long as your financial life is guided by comparison, you'll never feel like it's enough. And that keeps you running. Now imagine what your life would look like if, instead of needing to run faster, you only needed to maintain a system that works even in tough months. Imagine waking up knowing that even if something goes wrong, you won't collapse. Imagine negotiating a job without desperation. Imagine saying no to something that doesn't make sense without fear. That's wealth in construction. It's not a luxury car. It's not flashy displays. It's mental freedom. And mental freedom is the true turning point because when you're not pressured, you start thinking about strategic growth. You start looking for ways to increase income intelligently, not desperately. You start investing in learning. You start seeing opportunities that used to pass unnoticed because your mind was too busy trying to survive. And here's the final proof that ties everything together. Working more only increases your capacity to earn money. Structure increases your capacity to keep and multiply it. Without keeping, there is no multiplying. Without multiplying, there is no wealth. So the question that really matters isn't how much can I work, but how much can I retain and organize? If you've understood this far, you're already ahead of many people. And now I want to close with something very clear. Working is necessary. Effort is honorable. Growth is possible. But getting rich requires systems, not exhaustion. If you keep betting only on working more, you might improve your income, but you'll remain vulnerable. If you build structure, Even earning little, you start building something solid. And solid things grow. If this content is opening your mind, do one thing now. Leave a like, because that helps this video reach more people who are stuck in this cycle of overworking and getting nowhere. Subscribe to the channel if you want to learn how to organize your financial life in a simple, real, and achievable way without magical promises. And I want to know if you really stayed until the end. Comment the word structure down below. Just that wargy, because if you understand the power of structure, you've already started leaving survival mode.